Welcome back to the home studio and welcome to another episode of the Stevie Richards Show. My name is Stevie Richards. This is episode 3. Today we're going to talk about the Damien Priest non-kickout. That's going to be our Smartboard segment today. Also, we're going to talk about banned moves, both past and present, and maybe future. What should be banned as far as dangerous moves in pro wrestling. But now I hand it off to the most dangerous co-host in all pro wrestling, James from WSI. How you doing?
Hello. I'm trying to think who's the
That
most
didn't
dangerous
sound
ring
very,
announcer.
that didn't sound very dangerous.
Oh, hello.
Hello.
Hello. Who's the most dangerous ring announcer? It wasn't Penza, was it?
Was it Mills Lane?
No, it was Michael Gary Capetta.
Oh, that, yes.
Yeah. I was
yes.
trying to think who the most dangerous ring announcer. Okay, I'll be the most dangerous co-host. How
Gary
about
Michael Capetta,
that?
by the way.
Yes. Damn
By
it.
the way, yeah, also, Gary Michael Capetta, what I discovered in like the past 2 weeks, actually does not live that far from me. I don't know exactly where here in Florida, but according to John Walters, RJ Brewer from Lucha Libre USA, Gary Michael Capetta, I like Michael Gary Capetta. That sounds like a wrestling name. Gary Michael Capetta lives not too far from me, which means obviously he's kayfabing me. Don't kayfabe me, Gary.
Dude, everyone lives in Florida.
It feels like that. We're over 22 million people, I think, in the state. I think it might be time to check out Wyoming or Montana. Wyoming, I actually have to see. Bischoff has a great place up there right near the Yellowstone River. Every time, like with the Who Killed WCW, when you have that profile shot with him looking out into like just the expanse of Wyoming, it's just so beautiful.
Cody. Is it Cody, Wyoming? He lives in? Something like that.
Yes,
Yeah.
I believe so. Hey, there's Cody, there's Casper, there's a bunch, but I think he's in Cody.
Yeah. It's, the only places I've been to in America is New York and Philly. And I sort of think I'm not quite getting the full breadth of experience of the country. So at some point, I nearly did this. I know this isn't anything to do with wrestling, but I'm telling you the story. Is when I went to Philly, I was originally going to wrap it around like a month, like driving across America. And I was going to start in Portland or somewhere in Washington and Oregon or something like that. Work my way to Vegas and fly to Philly. And then afterwards, I thought, man, that sounds like a lot of work, and I didn't. It sounded like a lot of work and a lot of expense. So I ended up like boxing it off and not doing it. But I really regret that because I really want to go to Yellowstone. I really want to go to I just want to drive across the desert. I want to be bored stiff driving through Kansas. You know, when there's nothing there. You know, I don't know if I'm romanticizing it in my head a bit too much. Like, you know, I've watched Dumb and Dumber so many. People forget that Dumb and Dumber is a great road movie. But I love American road movies. And I want to do
I'll
that.
give you a YouTube channel. Everybody out there, this is I watch this person because of the production stuff. So everything we're trying to do here, this guy, Trent the Traveler, he travels in a van. He lives in a van. He's also somebody that's involved with special effects, graphics, production stuff, and everything. And the way he travels and what he documents makes it a very fascinating thing. He's in Alaska right now, and he just does a great job. So I definitely recommend. We could start with the plugs after this, but we're plugging somebody else first. Check out Trent the Traveler on YouTube. He's an excellent. It's just a nice, warm, cozy, like very positive channel, which you don't get a whole lot on YouTube. So when are we going to bury somebody? Now that we talked about positivity,
no, we've got to do plugs first before we bury everybody in the show. I'll do mine first very quickly. I've got 2 books, Owen Hart and The Rock, 2 fine biographies I wrote over the past few years that I recommend. Well, of course, I'm going to recommend you buy them. Money comes to me. But they're excellent books, let me tell you that. Links are in the description of this video and every single video. Similarly, just before, because I know Stevie wants to plug some of his stuff as well, I want to thank everybody for sticking with us and, quite frankly, making this channel a success already. I didn't think it'd happen this quickly, but we were looking at the numbers coming in, and one day we were going, oh, yeah, it's not bad. We're getting like 15,000 views a day, and then, bam, we start getting 70,000 views a day. It's like, oh, okay, then. We're doing really well. So that happened after about 9 days. So everybody, thank you so much for sticking with us. We'll give you so much more in the way of the best content on YouTube wrestling and that kind of thing, or at least we will attempt to. But quite frankly, I think we're leagues ahead of practically everybody already.
Well, we're going to do our best. We're not going to rest on our laurels, and we both have ample amounts of obsessive compulsive disorder and maybe some kind of mild disorder outside of that, where we get up in the middle of the night and think about production and all that stuff. It's like that meme where you're laying next to your wife and she's like, I bet he's thinking about other women. And you're like,
Mm.
wonder if I had a fourth camera overhead like the Wile E. Coyote camera. Will that put us over the top? But I echo what you said. Our gratitude to everybody out there. Right now, we're over 17,000 subscribers as we're recording this, and we can't be more pleased with that. And it just motivates us more to do that. But as far as plugs with me, besides this, as far as the Stevie Richards show, I always have Stevie Richards Fitness. A lot of wrestling fans are familiar with that. But if you're not, go over and check it out. We review home, garage, gym equipment. Also, try to be a great information source for anybody in the market for gym equipment. So please check that out, Stevie Richards Fitness on YouTube. We're about to almost get closer to 100,000 there, James, as far as subscribers. And also, we have affiliate links in the description of recommended brands with Stevie Richards Fitness. Also, since we started the show, the Cameo stuff at cameo.com/Stevie Richards has really picked up, where people have asked about different questions about moves and my opinions about safety and wrestling. Very, very uh, detailed questions on that. Not just, hey, can you tell my friend he's an idiot or an asshole or, excuse my language, or any of
Mm.
that other stuff. But they really have some very intelligent questions where I actually have to do a little bit of research to say, okay, let me get this right. So Camion, my God,
Mm.
maybe we should start a site called Camion.
Mm.
Just
Off brand.
I had an extra letter in there by accident, but cameo.com/Stevie Richards. But let's get to what the people have been waiting for, and that is our list of stories. The first one being something that is hopeful, yet started out pretty scary, right, James?
Yeah, so Kevin Sullivan, we're going to bring up briefly. On May 12th, 2024, while in Florida for autograph signings, Kevin suffered a devastating accident. This write-up is from his GoFundMe. I'll explain in a second. He underwent emergency surgery that saved his leg and life, but faced severe complications, including sepsis and encephalitis. This unforeseen catastrophe has placed an immense financial burden on his family, as Kevin has been in and out of consciousness in the ICU far from home. I'm doing a terrible job of reading this. Despite these challenges, Kevin was shown incredibly resilient. Months later, he's still fighting to regain his independence. Even with an excellent insurance plan, the coverage is nearly exhausted due to the length of the stay. Now, on his GoFundMe, we'll leave a link on the description here so you can visit it and maybe even donate if you wish to. The milk of human kindness has already poured forth with this. We're a bit sort of behind the eight ball, but the GoFundMe was for $20,000. They've got nearly 50,000 already, and we want to mention some of the people from the wrestling world people have heard of who've donated. Tony Khan was the biggest contributor, giving $10,000. Jim Cornette gave $5,000. Chris Jericho gave a few thousand. Scott D'Amore, Cody Runnels, and Dallas Page are among others who gave four figures to Kevin Sullivan as well.
Well, first and foremost, the most important thing is we wish Kevin and his family well. Hopefully, Kevin recovers. It looks like he's on his way to that. But obviously, as you get older, and as far as obviously being in the hospital and suffering with sepsis and other complications, that lengthens his stay. I think the only thing I would say outside of the fact on the positive end, it's great when the wrestling community or any community gets together to help someone that's down. And this is completely different than most cases. Like you said, the thing that stuck out to me and you when we were discussing this via messages was he has insurance. The family has health insurance. And yet the US healthcare system, which you're going to have a pretty strong opinion on, and so do I, how in the world do you have insurance of any sort? And you're still, when you're in ICU or you're in a very dire state, there's a limitation on how long you can say, yeah, you're really sick. You're in ICU. You could have died, but can you get out of here soon? That kind of sums it up, right?
Mm-hmm. I could go on this forever, let me tell you, but I'm not going to, because this is more, it's a wrestling podcast, and we're merely wishing Kevin Sullivan the best. I suppose you had quite a few interactions with him in ECW. I don't know if you saw him much in WCW. I know he was, or had he been deposed as Booker at that time in late 97? I can't remember, but I know he was around in ECW at the same time you were.
Yeah, when I first got there, and I believe the night that we won the tag titles, I could be off on that. That was June 30th, 1995. Raven and myself were booked to beat Public Enemy. So it was an incredible opportunity. Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. So the positive of Jim Thorpe was the tag team title victory. The crowd was very wild. But Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania also was literally on stilts off of the side of a mountain. And I'm sure you've heard about Jim Thorpe, PA. And it literally, there was a collapse, not when we were wrestling there, but a few years after that. So it was not stable. The reason I bring that up, one of my memories of Kevin wrestling was that he had Eric Sims, which you may know that name. He used to book a lot of guys for autograph signings, appearances, and stuff. And he had booked, I believe, Kevin for some other stuff outside ECW. Eric Sims had his table at Jim Thorpe, and Kevin Sullivan purposely went over there and destroyed the merch table on him. So, yeah. So Kevin used to do that. A few people, Abdul the Butcher, I think, used to do that to a lot of, these third party guys and fans if they would have a table, or even some of the boys they would rib to destroy their merch table. So I do remember that as a wrestler, as a fan, and even as a wrestler at times. Kevin Sullivan was so convincing as the devil that when I did meet him, there was still this odd kind of wall I put up and a little bit of a, distance, because he has that intensity. I spoke about it before with other people, with Stone Cold Steve Austin and other people. He just had this intensity, this realism to what he did and how he acted, where as a fan, I believe this dude was a devil worshiper. He was all the way in on that. And then when I was around him and he would talk about Boston sports and other things, I was like, what? You're not going to talk about Satan? You're not going to try to recruit me for your satanic cult or anything? But he is an incredible mind, still an incredible mind in the business. There's a reason why Kevin was a booker almost everywhere, including that run in Florida. I think he helped out with creative down there in Florida Championship Wrestling when he was doing the devil gimmick.
I suspect he probably was. I know Dusty was the head booker there for a while. I know, because I know obviously personally, that Dutch took over from Dusty when he left, and then Dutch left. Under Dutch was Michael Hayes at the time, and then I think under Michael Hayes might have been like Fonzie or something like that, just like throwing in ideas here, there, and everywhere. But as far as like Florida booking, I suspect that Kevin, who else could write for Kevin like that?
Well, that's the thing. It was Kevin just having creative control over his act, his gimmick, his storylines. It sure feels like, from watching, because I watched a couple of things on YouTube from the past when he was there. I got scared all over again, by the way, and freaked out. And that's the effect great characters have, even as a worker over 30 years in. And you're looking at that, and it just brings you back to the childhood of fear or hope or love or hate or whatever it might be. But yeah, nobody could write that, and it was so out of pocket for that time, for the characters. The most, and we're gonna get to the greatest heels of all time and who I believe is the greatest heel in wrestling history. But back then, it was so out of pocket, outside of the anti-American, gimmick, or the gimmick of I'm a snooty snob and I'm better than you. This was completely new. And I think taboo in a lot of ways, especially in the South. Florida, and wherever Florida Championship Wrestling aired, and I believe he did the gimmick in Georgia Championship Wrestling. So basically, the Bible Belt is where you have a Satan worshiper, a cult leader on your show. So that was an incredible chance that the stations, the promotions, and everybody else involved, because I got to think they lost advertisers off of that back in the 70s and 80s, if they had many.
It's funny, I remember Dan Severn saying this as well, and this is in the late 90s, and they wanted Dan Severn to be the beast, but turn into, like he's in league with Satan for the Ministry of Darkness, and they wanted to draw 666 on his forehead, and he said, absolutely not. I come from a small town. This could affect me. And because, his neighbors might try and lynch him, that kind of thing, but that was in the late 90s. So I'm sure 15 years earlier, it was probably more likely that someone would take umbrage in real life with Kevin.
Well, yeah, hopefully Kevin gets better, just for Kevin and his family's sake. But selfishly, what we just brought up, it would be great to ask Kevin what the mood and the culture and the environment was during that time doing that character.
Mm.
That would be that would be a book all on its own that you could write.
Yeah.
So I
Kevin,
gave you an idea.
yeah, Kevin needs to pull through this and write a book, because that would be one of the more interesting books, definitely. I mean, I've interviewed him quite a few times and stuff like that, but I had no idea that he was sick, and I think most people didn't, because the family wanted to keep the privacy, and of course that's their prerogative too. So to end on this segment, I guess, best wishes to Kevin. Hope he pulls through.
Yeah, and also on a positive note, the most positive thing we could do is definitely pray or you feel or send out positive vibes or whatever you do or whatever you believe in. But it is a very hopeful, positive thing when you see Tony Khan, Cornette, Chris Jericho, Demore, Cody Runnels, DDP, a host of other people too, that when it counts, everybody puts their petty stuff aside and the wrestling community comes together to help one of their people that are, temporarily fallen and hopefully recovering and on the way to that.
Now, we're going to move on to our next segment, and this is the first segment where we disagree with somebody, of many, most likely, I think. Maybe not in this episode, but it's all a bit of fun. The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. He was on documentary that WWE released recently about WrestleMania 40. Now, the WrestleMania 40 documentary in itself might be amusing because I think it gives a bit of an impression that, hey, we all knew what we were doing the entire time with Dwayne Johnson coming in and being the boss and Cody Rhodes and winning the Royal Rumble and da-da-da-da. I don't think many people believed it. But specifically, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, says something to the effect of, I couldn't find the quote for whatever reason, but anyway, he says that the final boss period of him turning bad guy on Cody Rhodes made him the greatest heel of all time. That the final boss was the greatest heel character of all time. And I was thinking, as probably a lot of people were thinking, that sure encompasses a lot of wrestling to claim that 3-month run was the greatest heel run of all time. So, that being said, oh, and also I think there was only really one angle that he did where he beat up Cody Rhodes. I can't particularly remember any others other than just a bunch of interviews. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
that's pretty much.
Yeah,
You're right about that. There was only one beatdown, one heat thing outside the bus, and yeah, Rocky had a lot of latitude to curse and do whatever, and don't wrap me up or don't count me down, or did the whole thing kind of like what Austin did in the studio way back during his initial heel run. Yeah, I vehemently disagree, but I kind of love it at the same time because that's what a heel would do. That's what one of the greatest heels would do is say, I'm the greatest heel in history to cause people talking and all that stuff. It's kind of odd too, because I'm not so sure if Rocky's going to come back as a heel on Solo's side or as a babyface on Roman's side. That would lopside whatever the bloodline storyline of the split right now, with Solo saying he's now the tribal chief and Roman isn't. It would be kind of cool to get the rub off of Rocky as what I believe, I do agree, probably one of the strongest heels to come along in the past 5 to 10 years, maybe a little bit longer. I'd agree with that. But the greatest wrestling heel of all time, I was going to do a video on the previous channel about this and drawing it up and talking about it. But, copyright claims and blocks and all that stuff, I couldn't really get it to the point where it could be produced. But I'll give this to you, and then I'm going to go into a real deep dive about why I believe there's only one person that stands out amongst anybody as the greatest wrestling heel of all time.
The Miz.
Yep.
I'm joking. I'm joking.
A great dependable heel, but not the greatest of all time. Who would you say is a better heel than Rock or had a better heel run? Time constraints, kind of eliminated from that 3 months compared to whatever. But who would you consider to be a better heel than Rocky?
I've got a very strong opinion on this, but I'll leave mine till after yours. Have you got a top 5 you could maybe give us? Because I gave you a list of probably about 50 different people actually in the end that you could pluck from. But do you have a list of a top 5 or maybe even some mentions just out of the top 5 before we get into the list full?
Yeah, I mean, I'll leave my number 1, who I believe usurps anybody in this particular thing. And I think since we just talked about him, Kevin Sullivan, for that time with that character, I think was a great heel because it was definitely something that, the religious base, or at least the faith-based people that mostly went to these wrestling shows and the Bible Belt, especially back then, would completely hate him. I believe Ted DiBiase's up there because Vince McMahon would create characters based on either versions of him or versions of people or entities that he hated. For instance, Ted DiBiase represented Vince as the $1 million man. All the things about a rich snob, a blue blood, all these people that are condescending, look down on people and buy things. Vince would essentially rent or buy talent. So he was this.
Well, there was Jerry Graham that's almost a playoff of, in the sense that I don't know about in real life, but Jerry Graham was Vince McMahon's most favorite wrestler when he was a kid. And Jerry Graham had the pink Cadillac and throwing money around and that kind of thing. So that character was almost born 30 years earlier, but Ted DiBiase, of course, did it best.
Yeah, I did not know about that. So that's a bit of wrestling history. I'm not privy to. I'll have to look that up. All these people in this list are heels for different reasons, or like JBL is just basically an updated version of the $1 million man. Who else? Alberto Del Rio is a recycled version of $1 million man and JBL with a Latin twist on it. Flair was a great heel because the heel champion being chased by the baby faces drew money, sold tickets, sold pay-per-views. Roddy Piper, same thing. You had a heel that basically eventually he was such a great talker, people started to like him. So he turned himself babyface. But one of the strongest heels, and the reason why Piper is a strong heel is because he made Hogan an immense babyface. You cannot have a babyface be over without a really, really strong and over heel. So I think as far as heels, Rocky was a very strong heel because he got Cody over to the point where people didn't want to see the Rock Roman match at WrestleMania. And Hunter, Triple H, what did he say? 85% of this was written in October. I don't know if I buy that either. But that's good. They shifted. They did what they were supposed to do and shifted it, created more interest. Brian Pillman with the loose cannon gimmick, that was a heel that made people feel put off. It wasn't like he was entertaining. You had to pay attention, but you were just like, it was like that Bruiser Brody thing. Hey, I'm in the crowd watching this, but when's he going to turn and make eye contact with me and attack me? That's the unpredictability of that. Raven being a mystical type of heel created interest, but you still wanted to see Dreamer, the All-American boy. See what I'm saying? There's always has to be the antagonist and protagonist. You cannot have one without the other. Now, with that being said, that was probably more than 5 people. The greatest wrestling heel of all time in all of history, bar none, in my opinion, is Sergeant Slaughter. Sergeant Slaughter took the Iron Sheik, which was a strong anti-American character, but being an American that defected and was a traitor and committed treason against his own country during a hot war with Iraq. This guy needed to wear a bulletproof vest. This guy needed a bulletproof limo. This guy could not go to his PTA meetings for his kids in Connecticut. This guy had to hide out, had security, and I don't know if it's 100% true, but there might have been security concerns at WrestleMania 7 that took it out of the Los Angeles Sports Coliseum, also low ticket sales as well. But they spun that to make him an even greater heel. Then they had to put it in the, what was it, the Los Angeles Sports Arena, which held like 8,000 people.
Yeah, they didn't sell that out either. Attendance, it claims here, 16,158. So I don't believe they actually sold that arena out either. So I think the prevailing wisdom is, because what was the LA Sports Coliseum or whatever? 100,000. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think the old joke is they said it was a bomb scare, so we had to move it. I was like, well, there was a bomb scare because that event was going to bomb. Yeah.
Well, that's my thing. You're talking about a guy who basically, and let's not forget, this is the other part of it that makes him the greatest heel of all time. He was, and then he came back after the heel run as one of the greatest Americana baby faces, the greatest patriotic baby face. This is G.I. Joe. So that's why it was the strongest heel run and was also he's the greatest heel. And I believe Slaughter in that WrestleMania match, if they didn't draw enough, he should have won over on Hogan and continued his heel run until the war ended.
I think by WrestleMania 7, the war had ended. It was a very short war, the Gulf War. Let me have a look.
But the war, then we had, back then, and then a few years later started the war on terror and everything. I just feel like that Middle Eastern tension you could have still squeezed a little bit more out of that, because you had the Iron Sheik for how many years then? And it runs together. You talk about the Sheik was with Iran, and talking about Iran and this whole thing with Slaughter paired up with the Sheik, by the way, as General Adnan was,
Sheik Adnan Al-Kaisi.
yeah,
And then
exactly.
and then Sheik was Colonel Mustafa.
Yes. So Sheik got another run and gave Slaughter the rub, because they were anti-American gimmicks and characters, and basically were paired with him in a trio. And you look at the way he also burned the Hulkamania flag as an effigy to burn the American flag. He had the curl-toed boots, everything. This was Slaughter's best work ever, and people legitimately wanted to kill him.
Now, you're mentioning here Sergeant Slaughter's second run as a bad guy, but what about the first run? Back in the old Allentown, Pennsylvania days, and that kind of thing. And then it was the Iron Sheik again, and then he attacks the Iron Sheik, and then he recites the Pledge of Allegiance, and then like that, he was the biggest babyface in probably more than Bob Backlund, who was on the downslide in '83 at that time. But
but he was just a drill instructor that gave orders, and he was, you had people in the audience, you need a haircut, and you need high and tight, and you need to dress and tuck your shirt in. He was basically almost like a drill sergeant version of the Right to Censor, where he was criticizing the people and trying to say he was better. So, yeah, he essentially treated everybody in the crowd and everybody in his promos and the people he worked like they were basic trainees at basic training. So it was a great point, though. He had 2 super strong heel runs and 2 super strong babyface runs, and then the G.I. Joe cartoon. I mean, you look at his body work, you got to put it right up there with people like Hogan, I believe.
I'm going to argue against Sergeant Slaughter for one massive reason. I can't argue with the earlier Sergeant Slaughter run, because it was a great run. But the second one, I would argue, because it might have been great television and getting death threats and really, really antagonizing people, but ultimately it didn't translate to the box office. So that's why I would discount that run as being the greatest ever, because it didn't turn into green, essentially. And then, the ticket sales and stuff. I think they had one more main event, SummerSlam, and it was 3-on-2 with that was the one where Ultimate Warrior got fired straight afterwards because he held up Vince, supposedly. But there's a lot more to that story as well. Mine would be Vince, because he's just the best. He was the best for years, but also he had the greatest babyface to play off as well. But if you discount Austin, how many people did Vince work with where he elevated them at the same time?
You know what? Now that you look at it, it might have to be a 1A, 1B. Now I give this asterisk next to Vince. He owned the company, had full creative control. He could do anything he wanted. He made the right decisions, but as time went on with the McMahons, and I'll stand by this, they did not give the rub and elevate. They elevated less and less each time. We're never going to recapture. We might be able to, hopefully, maybe AEW someday or somewhere, with Tony Khan might be forced to be a Mr. McMahon character, but he's not going to be able to pull it off like him. But with that being said, Vince and Austin, that's serendipity. The Mr. McMahon character, which, by the way, this is just a side note, may have never happened. Vince Russo was the one. I take Vince at his word for this. Everybody else wanted to sweep the Brett punch and black eye under the rug. They didn't want to mention it. And even when Vince was doing that Brett screwed Brett promo, Vince was 100% convinced he was going to be the babyface. But Russo, who was the head writer and obviously had the spot to be able to suggest, said, you're a heel. You're an absolute heel. And when Vince embraced that, which it could have went either way just that day. If Pat Patterson got to him last, or Briscoe, or anybody who could tell him what he wanted to hear. I don't know how it happened, but maybe Vince Russo just got to him last, as I said in a previous episode. And we would have never had the greatest year possibly ticket sales wise, buy rates, nor the greatest babyface character that every person who works for a boss, who gets screwed over, who doesn't get paid enough, who's struggling. Steve Austin, we all lived vicariously through him. It was literally just a perfect storm at that time. Hogan in 91, 92, I believe it was a 91 WrestleMania 7.
Yep.
All right. So there was the beginning, I think, of the downturn of WWF at the time, because we had the Bob Holly's race car driver, the Duke that jumps the Drosy. Then we had the TL Hoppers, the Goon. Not too long after that, but it was starting to kind of take slow steps down. Also, we had the steroid trial during that time, right? Or the investigation.
Yeah, the investigation kicks
92?
off. Yeah, 91, 92, and then the Ring Boy thing as well. And then I think that gets resolved in 94.
So you have a lot of things happening externally around that. I even think, I don't know the exact date. Well, what about the former announcer that went on Phil
No.
Donahue to confront Vince?
Yeah.
Was that 91, 92 as well?
Mm.
I'm not sure the exact, but I'm saying we're in a trend of an imperfect storm that Slaughter could have drew big money. He had Hogan, Hogan at that time, Vince was sort of convinced Hogan was starting to be on the downward trend. So I don't know. I mean, it could just be he had so much heat, it was go away heat. But I don't know how you I don't know how you define Slaughter's run, or you go back and you rebook the run to be better, because I think it was done to perfection. Creatively, yes. I think it was perfect. You make a great point that McMahon and Austin, and McMahon as a heel, drew way more money than Slaughter. So I'll give you that. But I think it's really from strictly a creative standpoint, or a character looking at me being wanting to be a character or be a heel. That would be the point where you just can't go beyond that, and just to close out the point. Yeah. You have the negative too. When you're a heel that hot, Rocky didn't have to wear a bulletproof vest. Rocky didn't have to have a bulletproof limo. He's still entertaining as a heel. So getting back to that, you're captivating, you're entertaining, you draw money, but you're not the greatest heel in all of wrestling history.
Before we move off The Rock, you actually did work with The Rock back in the Right to Censor era, and people love to hear a story about what some of the big superstars are like to work with, and what they're really like backstage, because they don't have podcasts and they'll never admit it themselves. But you worked with a guy in his prime, 2000. What was he like to work with, and what was he like to be around? And actually, also, did he have his own dressing room?
That I don't know. I don't know about the dressing room stuff, because most times I would hide out in the luxury boxes and play video games and stuff like that. I would not see most people throughout the day. But this was one day where, he had worked Val in a singles, I believe. And also we did a promo with China, Billy Gunn, and Rocky on a SmackDown where there was a 6-man tag as well. So he's a pleasure to work with. He's one of the most disarming, kindest people you'll ever meet on a personal level. He understands it. The whole thing about $7, he had nothing. He washed out of, Canadian football. He had nothing, basically. He kept failing. And then he went to try wrestling, which his father, I believe, was really against. Rocky Johnson did not want him to get into the wrestling business, but Rocky pushed through, did that. He's absolutely, without a doubt, a rags to riches story. Literally broke. $7 Productions. He had $7 to his name. That's not hyperbole or just a story. A lot of wrestlers, if they have $7 in their pocket, they feel like they're rich sometimes, back then especially. So he was really nice to talk to on a personal level. When it came to kind of calling matches or calling spots or doing whatever, Rocky knew what he had to do to get over. And that's where a friendly kind of, not with me personally, but witnessing it, a friendly kind of game of chicken, tap dance. How can we get our stuff in? But that's no different than any other talent. I actually had one argument with Rocky once, one argument, but it was for the best reasons. I was in the right to censor, and he was, I believe it was the singles match against Val. He came onto the outside, got spilled out or something. He didn't powder, he got knocked out or whatever. He was by the railing, which is that black thing now, not the actual, metal railing, but the padded barrier. And he wanted me to clothesline him to the outside over the barrier, over the railing. And I'm no good at doing that. I never throw clotheslines, or at least I try not to. They never look great, and I always try to avoid doing it. So I had said to him, like, "Well, Rocky, I don't throw a great clothesline. Is there anything else I can do? Can I just throw you over where you can take your own bump or whatever? Because I got buggy whip arms and I don't throw a great clothesline." And he said, "Just throw the clothesline. Don't worry about it." And I came back to him a little time later, and I said, "I'm thinking about it. I just don't want you to look like you're taking your own bump. I don't want it to look like crap." He's like, "Listen, just clothesline me. End of story." I was like, "Got it. Okay." But to me, that wasn't and he came afterwards and, he said, "Oh my God, you took my head off with that clothesline." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "No, actually, you're right. It did look like shit." So I've never been so unhappy and disappointed to be right in my life. But that was my argument, my heat with Rocky that day. I had heat with The Rock.
You had heat with The Rock,
title.
brother.
How I got heat with The Rock. I sound like Vince now.
You're in the first match. You're in the main event.
That's your favorite clip.
I do like that.
First match is the most. I mean, it's a mix between Vince McMahon and Paul Heyman. Are you calling me a liar? I can't even bug my eyes out like Paul when he does that.
We need to do Paul Heyman. No, we need to do him. We need to talk about Paul Heyman at some point in the future. I know. Is The Rock right? Okay, so as a kid, I always hated his punches. Were he like not the Dusty Rhodes thing? Maybe it was the Dusty Rhodes thing, where they looked like really light but actually hurt, or were they really light and you never felt them?
It all depends. I mean, Rocky has sort of an open hand slap type of punch, and he does the slap on himself to make the sound. So anytime you repeatedly get hit here, which most of his punches, I'll use the air quote, most of the punches will hit you in the side of the neck or under the chin or whatever. He never threw like Edge and Christian. Christian definitely threw what we call rubber mallets, like just basically punch you right in the forehead. And I would love to get hit with a rubber mallet. It probably wouldn't hurt as much. But Rocky, that's proof too. Rocky does not have good punches as far as technically, or you look at like the best punches. Like even Austin, I love the way Austin punches because it's a closed-handed version of Rocky, but he's kind of like glomming you kind of here. It touches, but you're not getting hurt. It's not like a full right cross.
But with Austin, I'm sorry to interrupt, but he always did the close hand, but then he would open it at the very last second, so you would never really notice. Or maybe he just did that later in his career, but I seem to remember him always open hand slapping, but only open at the very last split second, so you wouldn't notice.
At times. And the thing with Austin, too, is he would, especially if you had a shirt, he would grab you and start doing it. That's to keep his range. A lot of guys, if I wrestle somebody with a shirt, I'm always snatching their shirt and punching them because somebody could lean, move away, do whatever. And if you get a hold of them, from the length of your arm, how far you have to hit them. It's just an instinctual thing, but it comes with practice. And punches, by the way, Rip Rogers had great advice for people throwing punches, basically a balloon, a string. You just try not to hit it or just tap it very, very light. But that's how a lot of people used to train. I would do that, try to hit a punching bag without hitting it, stuff like that. It takes a lot of, and if it's moving, trying to do the jabs and stuff on the punching bag without, because usually you're going around in the circle if you're throwing those dusty jabs and then the big punch. But getting back to Rocky, this just proves when a person is over, whatever they lack technically or form-wise with a punch, they're so over it doesn't even matter. And Rocky also punches the open hand, kind of limp wrist, spits on the hand, Hey, but people react to it every single time. So that's the beauty of wrestling. You would say, and I'm convinced there may have been 1 to 2 people that told Rocky, a lot like Ultimate Warrior, telling him, don't run to the ring. That's not going to last long. Probably did tell him, your punches are crap. Don't throw them anymore. But he knew the way his charisma and the way he delivered that, even that last one, that it would get over. And it did.
He would throw his punches almost like a running stance. So he'd do that and then throw it, but it sort of allowed him to do so many, like
He stomps with both his feet. He stomps with both. Most of that front foot is usually the stomp, but Rocky is almost midair and comes down and stomps and does the either slap to his leg or stomach or something like that, depending upon where he's positioned. But once again, if you got an opponent with longer hair like I have long hair, it makes it so easy to miss. You can miss somebody by this much if I have hair down here, or if my hair is here, if you just tap me here, or kind of like kicks when people are down on the mat. Longer hair enables me to kind of move around and not get, kind of, but to kind of like rubber malleted with your foot or your hand.
Right, because we're just talking about punches. We have to, I don't know if this is a top 5 you've got in your head that you were thinking about or whatever, but what is because this is something I was going to ask you at some other point, but I might as well ask it now since we're talking about it. What is the easiest way to make a punch look good for, let's say, I'm getting into the wrestling business and you say, well, don't throw a punch like this, that, or the other. You should do it this way. And then it's sort of like a fail-safe way of punching where it will always look good. And who, in your opinion, had the best punches in wrestling history?
Number one thing I would say if you're starting out in the wrestling business, you're not going to throw any punches. You're not going to throw any punches because more of the times than not, when you start, you're going to be a baby face. So you would teach people how to throw forearms. You would teach people how to wrestle and how to counter some heel who's trying to throw a punch by out wrestling. In other words, somebody goes to throw a punch, they spin all the way around because you ducked, you schoolboy them. And somebody goes to throw a punch off the ropes, you duck, or you go through it, they duck down, sunset flip. You're gonna come out of it as you need to learn how to wrestle. And throwing punches requires a lot of practice, like the Rip Rogers thing. It's kind of like cutting promos. You got to do it in the mirror or in front of people and being uncomfortable and do 10,000 bad takes, 10,000 bad punches, even moves. You got to do it wrong 10,000 times, 10,000 hour rule for boxing or anything. I would say punches are something that shouldn't even be thrown in the first 2 to 3 matches on a show, on a card. It's not necessary. Everything, the psychology of the punch, the psychology of the match, and the psychology of the show, that's the way you got to think about that. And coming back to that point about the punches, obviously the easiest or the biggest margin error without really hurting anybody, but you can still knock somebody out, is the rubber mallet up here. But I wouldn't recommend it. Some people pull the hair and punch their own hand, but that can be exposed very easily. Other way to do it, always grab the hair. Like I said before, grab the hair, grab the shirt. If they're wearing a shirt, measure the range, and you kind of throw the punch like that. And where the position would be, if you are going to stiff somebody or you're not sure that it's going to be completely light, it's got to be here. But you can't do that forever because you're punching somebody directly into an artery, time and time again. So until you can throw a punch that looks good without hurting anybody, do not throw a punch. It's actually not needed. If you can get around and you could throw good flippers or European uppercuts, you're going to stand out because how many people right now do that? Regal's not there. Finley's not wrestling. Who else?
I think Cesaro does some good lifters. Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, we wouldn't get the AEW ratings. Who's watching that? Yeah, he throws them, but that's one guy, but it doesn't define him because they're waiting for the big swing or the neutralizer or whatever our finish. So the uppercuts don't stand out. Something like that, I would say if you throw a European uppercut on somebody, they should go down on their butt. They should bump. They should go, into the corner and collapse. It should be so much devastating because you're throwing your whole body. It's almost like throwing a clothesline shoulder block or something at somebody that's knocking them dead, off of that. All right, so who has the best punches? This is a trick question in a way, because I just talked about Rocky, who has fundamentally not a great punch, but one of the most over punches you'll ever see. Austin has a great punch because within his character of being a bar fighter, a brawler, your middle class guy just scraping and fighting the boss, literally and figuratively. That means a lot. Um, Bobby Eaton had an incredible punch for his time, even until today. He slapped, but it always looked good. Michael Hayes left would be positioned psychologically to be something that knocks somebody dead out of a comeback or getting their feet. It brings the baby face back down. Or when he was a baby face, you duck. It's like the Roddy Piper eye poke. Duck it, get that. They oversell it. And you play to the crowd. There is a story about that, though, that he actually knocked Cornette's teeth out with that jab one time
Really?
in NWA, I believe, right?
I don't know that story. No.
Yeah, he supposedly knocked Jim's teeth out with the left jab. Might have to check
Yeah.
on that. I believe it is a true story that I heard Cornette tell, but Michael Hayes stands out because that duck jab thing, and especially with if he gets the slap right, it crumbles people or makes them. Here's a name too that has a really good punch. That's a rubber mallet, but when it's mixed in with everything, it looks great. As Jimmy Valiant.
Mm.
Jimmy Valiant, and even the angle that he was involved with Paul Jones's Army. Think about how that had more of an underground feel than the NWA product at the time, which had a really ECW underground feel. This was the blood feud, the brawl and everything. So for Valiant's character and everybody in Paul Jones's Army, the punches and everything and the fighting meant more than a regular wrestling match.
I'm going to give you some names. While you were naming some people, I was thinking of some underrated one, Razor Ramon. I always thought I really loved that spinning punch. I thought it was great. I'm trying to pick people who wouldn't kill you with it either. So
Scott Hall, one of the greatest workers, one of the most underrated, and one of the lightest workers you'll ever be in the ring with for a guy that size. Yes, his punches. He did Kerry Von Erich's tornado punch without hurting anybody.
Well, that's exactly why I didn't bring Kerry, because he would kill everybody with it. Jerry Lawler, I mean, that's an easy one. Everyone always says. JBL, I mean, he probably killed quite a few people with it, but I always thought he was a good striker that doesn't get enough love.
He did the Fred Flintstone, Barney Rubble kind of thing, but not this. Yeah, he did more of a straight bar fight punch. Billy Gunn throws great punches as well.
Boss Man. I love them uppercuts when they landed. Because occasionally he'd just be off and then he'd be missing by quite a while. But some of those uppercuts I thought looked great. I loved his punches. Terry Funk, but I think he just hit people quite hard.
Yeah, he hit people. I can attest he hit people. That's what I'm saying during the Bret Hart thing. There's a callback to that. You had all these matches. Benoit's there with his punches and with everything. But Terry Funk in a hardcore match, come on, you egg-sucking dog, and just whacking you like a closed-handed slap. So Bret, I mean, he knocked me silly with those, and he wasn't trying to hurt anybody, but it's just Terry Funk.
Okay, he doesn't count then in the sense that because he was just hitting you, so that's why they look good. I didn't put Bret Hart down. I should have put Bret Hart. I loved his punches because he did like the open forearm thing. A couple more names: Barry Windham, which I think's worth mentioning, and also no one mentions this as a really good strike. I love Sting's back fists.
These things,
yeah, where he get him in the corner and kick him back.
Adopted those. Yeah, Shelton Benjamin adopted those in a lot of matches.
Yeah.
Sting found out a way to do punch, boom, boom. He found out a way to work all four planes of where you can hit somebody and with which hand. I give that to him because that was so unique for the time, and even now it's unique to where even kicks, adding kicks in with that, doubling a guy over, hitting him, uppercut him, kick him. It's just a nice barrage of firing up on somebody. I agree with that.
Anyone today that particularly impresses you with their strikes?
I think Karrion Kross throws pretty realistic punches without being over the top stompy, or slappy. I think Karrion Kross throws excellent punches. A lot of good punch. Damien Priest. I think the company, especially WWE, we'll talk about, has really cleaned up hiding. And, we're going to talk a little bit about the Damien Priest thing on the Smartboard, but they've done an excellent job, really, I think, telling people what not to do as far as what can make the whole product look weak. And I think that's going to actually spill over also into the banned moves that they've I think they're on a course right now to clean things up. Do you sense that over the past since the Triple H era, they're kind of cleaning up a lot of messy stuff and getting people out there that are really going to shine and not trying to expose a lot of their weaknesses?
It's a wonderful segue into the next segment, as you said about banned moves. But do you know what? I've noticed more recently they seem to be working a less restrictive style since the Triple H era has really come in, since like TKO took over. I think the handcuffs are off slightly with certain things they do. More moves that they would do in the independents. Let's say Sami Zayn, and he did what was that move off the top rope he did in WrestleMania? And that was like, his big move to do.
Oh, the brain buster to
Yeah, the brain
into the
buster.
turnbuckle?
Yeah. Things like
Yeah,
that
well,
are now
see,
seeping back in.
Yeah, it's seeping back. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing as an example. Also, I noticed, and they're going through growing pains, but I think they're coming through it right now. During the Triple H era in the beginning, and even in leading up to WrestleMania, they were allowing the talent to kind of go and ad lib and go a little freeform with the promos. Some of the promos went off the rails, if you noticed. So I think they're trying to. I'd rather you do that though. Give them the freedom to succeed or fail, then kind of rein them back in and try to figure out and assess, like, all right, what do they say well? What's not so good? How long's too long? How short is too short? Because we need to give them experience. So they're in a pretty. I think they're still in the adjustment phase since going from Vince to Hunter.
So we're talking about banned moves now, and I've written down some moves, and even me saying brain buster. That was one of the lists, one of the ones I put on the list, and then it was like, there's a brain buster on the ropes by Sami Zayn at WrestleMania. But here are a few that are either currently banned or very, very heavily restricted. So pile drivers, that's the obvious one. We have, and especially the inverted sit-down pile driver made infamous by Owen Hart in the WWF twice, in fact. He hurt Austin, and he luckily didn't permanently hurt Dan Severn with it. Canadian destroyers I don't see very often in WWE. I don't know if they just ban them because they are stupid or they're just overdone. I mean, especially in AEW and on the indies.
Do they do it in NXT, though? I think I've seen it in NXT, maybe not recently.
I suspect, yeah. I suspect they have been done, but they're very sparingly done in WWE. Now, with the pile driver thing, obviously, there are exceptions to all. Kane and Undertaker, they're very tall, they're very strong, and it's the safest way to give a pile driver, I guess. Would you concur with that, the tombstone?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would say the tombstone, you have way more control and your arms aren't in a position where you could dislocate an elbow or wrist. Because with the regular standard, say Paul Orndorff pile driver, who was one of the best, if not the best to ever do it, he'd jump in the air and be able to protect you. But your arms have to be around the legs. So you could have an injury to your forearms, to your wrist, to your elbow. You could, if you're on the right vitamins, you could tear a bicep or a tricep on the impact. That's the kind of thing that where Kane and Undertaker, with their size, what they do, and it's easy to measure where you're supposed to be. And if you have long hair, as I said with the punches, Kane and Taker are not going to they're going to put you even further away from the knees, which is the point of where you want to be above for a tombstone pile driver. But you hug them. They're hugging you. You're hugging them. And it's very, very tight. And it's almost like one body coming down. And of course, the space for that. I know we talked about a segment we planned on doing in the future about Hulk Hogan and some of the stories that Hogan tells. But I feel bad for Undertaker because Hogan, the famous Tuesday in Texas thing where Undertaker won the title and Hogan was worried about the tombstone on the chair by the ropes where Flair slid in the chair. And I remember watching it as a kid. I was like, he completely missed. He never touched the chair, but Hogan was in the ring. I potentially stretchered out, went to a hospital, and Taker felt awful and thought his career was over. And then he looked back at the tape and went, he never touched. And then there was something about Hogan saying, oh, my body was so stiffened up, it caused a neck injury, right? Am I wrong with that part?
Pretty much that, yeah. I think videotape did not bear the best witness to his complete lie there, that his head crashed and, gave him a neck injury. The thing is, right, Undertaker's, in the early days, he's given some really, really harsh tombstones, and he's given some of the lightest ones. There was also WrestleMania 8 where he gives a tombstone to Jake Roberts on the outside, right? And forget about a chair. You could have put a dining table under. You could have fit a gap in that much.
You could put my podcast table under there with the legs.
Exactly. And Jake's neck would have been absolutely fine. Just Undertaker was very cautious.
What's impressive about the way Taker does his or did his up until a point. Now, he would now, like Shawn Michaels, the most famous example, the legs would be outside. Taker's head would be between the legs, tombstone. But that Jake Roberts one from WrestleMania, I love that version where he had him over his shoulder. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And this for some reason, that looked more like it had stink on it than the standard center, which is the safest. But when he did that, almost like he was going to do a running power slam, but obviously a tombstone, there's something about that version that still stands out with me today, to say that is just amazing. Remember, he wrestled Glenn Kane at the WrestleMania where they had their first match. Hell of a storyline. He didn't want to fight Kane. Kane kept trying to goad him into it. But those two tombstones, Glenn landed on his head. And I believe because Glenn did not grip Taker, because he weighs 320, 330 pounds shoot at this time, Kane. So when he picked him up, if you're not gripping every bit as tight as Taker is, you're going to slide down towards the mat. And I think that's what happened to Glenn.
So, you've got the list of currently banned moves, so there's no sense me. It's the Stevie Richards show. I mean, you've got them, so read them out and what do you think of them?
Now, the burning, you talk about the pile driver, you talked about the tombstone and really broke that down. The burning hammer, you said obvious reasons, but aren't some talents using the burning hammer? Didn't I see that a couple of times? Isn't Karrion Kross doing a version of that?
Is he?
Somebody's doing a version of that in WWE. I do not know for sure. Brainbuster or the El Generico Sami Zayn turnbuckle one. Brainbuster! That's I can't, but that's what they say it is. The Brainbuster, and you say Ishii on Keith Lee. Right there, if I look at that kind of reminds me of the Juventud Guerrero, Jerry Lynn, Juventud Guerrero, myself, where a shorter person is doing a move to a bigger, taller person. It's a recipe for disaster, especially with the upper back, the neck, the head area. You need to have the person delivering the brainbuster be taller or at least be stronger than the person that's taking it. So, and really, when you think about it, most times the brainbuster, it looks like just a suplex that didn't go over all the way if you're trying to protect the person. So why do it? It's very strange.
I've got a couple of people who may have attempted to do the burning hammer in WWE. The Brian Kendrick, of all people.
He never tried to do it to me.
No.
Probably because he would know the answer.
Yeah. Michael Elgin and Tyler Rex. So, have you ever seen, I can't remember who it was, it was like Masawa or whoever, where they almost tried to give, it was like a pile driver. They had him in the pile driver position, but instead of sitting back, they just drop him on the knees and the dude just lands right on the head. And
well, it's a Tiger Driver 91, right?
Is that the time? No, they don't.
Yeah, you don't
have the
like it's the same bump though. It's just like you're dropping them as when I did the video on Omega and Offspray, I believe, with the he did the Tiger Driver 91 and dropped Kenny. That was I think it was my first video. So with that I don't understand that. And then people say, well, he got dropped high on his shoulders. Okay, I want you to sit in this chair and just fall backwards with your ass over tea kettle and tell me how your neck and head feel after that, because it doesn't matter if you slide them or do whatever. It doesn't take a whole lot to pinch a nerve, to injure your neck, to suffer a concussion even. That'd probably be the least of your worries right there. Speaking of which, chair shots to the head, obvious reasons. Now they do it. Back in the day, you would be read the riot act if you were lucky. If you weren't, you would get fined for putting your hands up to protect yourself from a chair shot. You'd be in trouble, be in a lot of trouble.
You kidding?
And we've never claimed to be the smartest group of people, the wrestling people, but you would get in a lot of trouble for putting your hands up. There's people that still the double dog collar match from September 1995, myself and Raven versus the Pitbulls, the 2 out of 3 falls. People still give Gary Wolf grief to this day because they were whacking me over the head. They were throwing me in the chairs, doing everything, and I never put my hands up. Gary put his forearm up on one weak chair shot I gave him on the outside. People can see it in the match. The boys still say something to him about it. So I tell you, I mean, it's an antiquated way of thinking, but it's, back then, if you didn't do it, you were sacrificing, and therefore you were getting over with the locker room for doing it. Now, thank God everybody's smartened up and they won't even. I mean, they've even limited chair shots to the back, which was really odd.
Mm.
One thing I would say that's every bit as bad as chair shots to the head are the DDTs and stuff like because it's a hard enough bump as it is. Like when Drew does the future shock, that's a pretty hard bump to take if he doesn't protect you. But if you put a chair in there, even if putting your forearm and your hands down, you run the risk of breaking your wrist, breaking your forearm, spraining something. And then, of course, if your head hits, that's a really odd bump to take. So I still don't understand why they introduce chairs into the DDT spots or superplexes and stuff like that.
I can't believe, because I've never heard this before, that people will get fined for putting their hands up. But I'm remembering back in the day, Austin would put all the main eventers, or some of the main eventers, obviously the smartest guys there, would put their hands up. Austin would, Triple H would.
Now, I never personally got fined, but I've heard stories about other towns getting fined for doing that. They could be like, but why would you lie about that? Or maybe it's an example. Someone said, okay, we'll tell everybody you got fined. That way the young talent will say, oh my God, if I get fined $500, I only make $500 tonight. I need to just take it. It's, but in WWE during the Attitude Era, there were those safety protocol. Let's back it up right there. I don't even know. There's a part of me that would be more scared about putting my hand up, thinking what kind of damage is going to be done to this part or my elbow or this part here, not the meat of your back, not the leg when it's on the mat. There's always a big risk versus almost no reward. Especially back then, everybody's hitting each other with chairs all the time. So how do you stand out? That's the super kick analogy. A million chair shots. If I can't do it better, I'm not going to do it.
Okay, right. I believe there's a way of doing it where it looks good. You don't put your hands up, yet you don't give them a concussion. Is it simply just a looseness in the wrists at the last potential minute, sort of like absorb some of the impact?
I don't even know. I couldn't tell you. It hurts no matter what. And then you have adrenaline, you have a live crowd. It's a pay-per-view. It might be WrestleMania. And you're just like, I got to make this count. The hardest chair shot that I ever threw outside of the JBL one is when I hit myself in the head with a chair at WrestleMania 19. I took my own hat off there, but I don't think there's a safe way to do it. And that's why I think a lot of times they take it out of there. There are certain guys that would throw like sweeping chair shots. I know exactly when they banned the chair shots to the head.
It was after Benoit.
It was when the ultra violent Hulk Hogan was walking around WCW. Remember that one with Conan and those chair shots?
Right.
Oh, you got to bring it up. You got to bring it up in B-roll, Chris. Hogan had and I'd rather do that because he wouldn't hurt anybody, but he would just dink everybody. He wouldn't even swing it.
He did that with the Ultimate Warrior in WCW. You know that terrible rematch, Halloween Havoc? Man, he could not have crushed a grape with that chair shot.
There's a meme online. It's not even the Warrior. He hits Conan as Conan's heads through the ropes, and then he lays waste to everybody up the aisle. It's so like I would take that. I'd still be wrestling if I could take those chair shots. I'm laughing just for the sake of it's just it's on the borderline of parody, but he wasn't trying to hurt anybody. So I'm not making fun of it for that reason. I'm making fun of it because we're wrestlers and we're all childish. We never grew up.
Do you know what I don't see? You may well correct me on this. The Death Valley Driver. I always loved that as a finisher, but does anyone do it these days?
Yeah, it's Cena's finish.
No, that was
It's the same difference. See, you're talking about the one where they hold on and kind of high on the neck
Dreamer
like a
Godfather
brainbuster
one, yeah.
But no, Dreamer would never drop me that high. Louis wouldn't drop me that high. Louis Spicolli, who initially started doing it over here. What the Ricochet was doing a version where he would flip with the guy and then land on his feet. That was a version of the Death Valley Driver. They're using it. I mean, R-Truth's using it right now with the, paying tribute to his childhood hero, John Cena, which is still super entertaining. Vertebreaker is on the list right here until recently. But do you know what match got the Vertebreaker permanently banned at the time?
I know it was Shane Helms, but I don't know.
Versus me.
Oh, was it versus you?
Yep. It was before a pay-per-view during the live Sunday night heats before the pay-per-view. He did the Vertebreaker, and after that, they said no more.
So did
it was safe, too. It was totally fine.
That's what I was going to ask. Did it go wrong, or no? It just
Vince
just went, Jesus, that's a recipe for disaster.
Pretty much, and he could be right. I mean, you look at the way that Homicide used to do it when it was called the Cop Killer. He would drop people. He would drop them as safe as he could. But once again, we're at a point with that. It's kind of the opposite. And I'll talk about the tombstone, pile driver. You definitely want the person doing it to be taller, obviously stronger, to be able to hold up even a bigger guy. But with the Vertebreaker, me being tall was an advantage because there was that much more of my upper body and my back that could land and make it look like I landed high on my neck. So I just basically slid down Shane's back. We jumped, but I slid down. So it wasn't that bad. But I've seen it to where people want to stick their legs straight up in the air, then they land pretty harsh. My legs were kind of over his shoulders, so I just kind of slid down there. It still got a reaction, got a pop, but also the office thought it was too devastating at the time too. So I told him, you worked yourself into getting your move banned. So,
I've written a few more things now because I know Cody Rhodes did the Vertebreaker. I wrote a couple more things. Randy Orton punt was banned for a while. It didn't because he actually just kicked Vince McMahon's head in, and but he started doing it again in 2020. Curb stomp, that was banned for a couple of years because I think it was on the Today Show in a clip, and Vince just went, "This is a bad example for kids." I know I think it was it the Main Event when the new version of Main Event, which is like a C show in the mornings or something like that. It was one of the C shows where Vince had banned loads of moves like the DDT, anything that he thought kids could emulate. Essentially, it was geared towards kids. I can't remember what the show was. Maybe it was Main Event or Superstars again or something. But
there was that kid way back, Lionel Tate, I believe his name was, that there was a lawsuit because he did a move to a friend, and that was the big lawsuit against WWE at the time. That was many, many years ago. I think I was in the company when that happened. I want to talk about the curb stomp as you're looking that up. I don't know why the curb stomp is a thing, just because there's either a big level of protection where you're obviously putting your hands in front of you or you're trying not to take it. And then there's the people that completely eat it. And you can see that they're at the side of their head, their temple, their cheekbone, their jaw is just getting driven in, and there's no space between that. I mean, obviously Rollins isn't trying to stop him through the mat, but he is pushing down to have him take a bump. So to me, it's just, I don't think it's worth it because half the roster, is kind of like trepidatious with taking it, I can tell. And the other half just knocks themselves out to a point with that. So, and he's got so many other moves that could be finishes. We're going to see with the Smartboard, like that superplex Falcon at the Falcon's Arrow could be a finish within itself. So impressive. But the curb stomp is what they choose. The last one that we're talking about, if you can just, fact check me on that, will be the Styles Clash. We're going to talk about that in detail.
I was almost going to say, should we leave the Styles Clash because that's his own video? Should we leave that for another episode, or do you want to get
let's
involved
do it next week? We can do it next week. Yeah. All right, good tease. I took the Styles Clash. People know about that. I'm going to speak in detail about what went wrong with that Styles Clash.
Yeah, that was at one point banned with WWE as well. Chris Jericho was the one who helped convince the powers that be to bring it back, but but it's gone wrong a few times. It's always the same thing; it goes wrong. But what moves do you think WWE should ban for one reason or another? Maybe they just look crappy, or because we're on the theme of dangerous moves here. What moves do you think are dangerous that may not even look dangerous, but over time can really weigh you down?
This is the tough part because there's two different schools of thought. You can either have the company institute these bans or limitations, say on a super kick, DDT, chair shots, blood, whatever. But it really is up to the locker room to police itself and say, this is hurting too many of the boys. We should really talk about this. Not talking about Wrestler's Court or anything. I'm talking mostly about, a guy like Taker, somebody comes in, or somebody just kind of talks more and more about it to the talent that's doing the move or the talents and just say, listen, guys, this just doesn't make sense. It doesn't get you more over. Not everybody wants to take it. And that is with any move, the finish especially, but any move that you want to put into your 5 moves of doom, especially the finish, when you come up with that, you have to say, number one, can I do it safely to everyone, no matter their size, height, weight? Can I do this safely to everybody? Number two, am I able to do this? I say this all the time. Am I able to do this with a leg injury that's not a part of storyline or not something they're baked into it? Because I can't do it, then what do I do? Is it a move that I can do no matter what the situation with my body, with the storyline, the amount of time, whoever's potentially going to come into the company? So say I have a move, for example, say I have a move where, I don't know, I superplex everybody. Now here comes Big Show from WCW. And they want me to work with Big Show. But they want me to go over. Okay, my finish doesn't translate into doing it, and I'm not strong enough, and it isn't going to look good, and it's not going to be safe. It's just going to be a mess. So I have a super kick, just talking about me. If I can figure out a way to super kick Big Show as I jump off a ladder or do whatever, or whatever kind of like way I can play to his size, but I can do it to anybody. Whether I duck a clothesline, they run at me, I do anything, I can do that. That's the way any move should be put in there. Also, I'm going to be in this company 10 to 15 years. You said the diving headbutt. If I work 300 days a year and I'm going over, which is the point of being in the business is, going over, getting over, making more money. I'm going to have to do this every night for 300 days a year. Okay, my head, I might be able to miss them with that. What's my sternum going to feel like? What's my ribs going to feel like? What's my hips going to feel like? What's my knees going to feel like? Because you're coming down on all those body parts. Essentially what I said, it's a miracle that Savage for so many years and decades could do that elbow, landing on the same hip all the time, then doing the double axe handle to the floor, house show or not, 300 days a year, if not more. That's the way I feel like, when the office starts to ban stuff, I feel like that the boys get a little resentful and they feel like they're being handcuffed. And whether they're for good or bad reason, sometimes if you're told you cannot do this, there's always going to be that little rebellious thing. But if the locker room turns around and says, let's just figure this out because we want everybody to stay here, make money, and be here for a long time. I feel like that has, in other words, more flies with honey than vinegar type thing.
Another thing that I thought would be prudent for people to not do too many of leg drops. So I always just think, especially from the top rope or something like that. I can imagine that wearing somebody down. I think Matt Hardy's terribly worn down after doing so many of them. As an example, I mean Hulk Hogan. How many leg drops did he do? And he wasn't doing it off the ropes, and that messed his back.
Well,
up
don't
for so
ask
many
him;
years.
He might get the number wrong.
Yeah, but, he had 48 surgeries, I believe, on that.
Well, he had a ton of surgeries during my time in TNA. He had the Spinal Institute, did the laser surgery, had the things firing off his nerve ending. He has some machine. He's been through a lot. So let's not, and we wouldn't be talking about the business right now and monetizing it in any form or fashion if it wasn't for people like Hulk Hogan and let's throw Vince McMahon in there.
Mm.
They're the guys, essentially, those two guys are the reason we're able to do what we're able to do today.
We're going to move on. We're going to go to our first. Oh, no, well, actually, it's our only whiteboard segment because the Styles Clash was going to be the first one. But no, we're going to move on to our only whiteboard segment now. And it is Damien Priest and Seth Rollins, the non-kick-out heard around the world at Money in the Bank this previous Saturday. I think they're on Saturdays now. They used to be on Sundays for so long now, I always forget, apart from Tuesday in Texas. Or some of the Survivor Series used to be on Thanksgiving, which have been on a Thursday. They've been on every day, pretty much. Anyway, the point is there was meant to be a kick out. The referee stalls at 2 when he should be counting at 3. But here is Stevie at the whiteboard to explain everything and what he thinks went wrong.
So here we have the Money in the Bank 2024 World Heavyweight title match, the finish actually, between Damien Priest, the champion, and Seth Rollins, the challenger. This was an excellent match, and obviously more of the attention is on what we're going to talk about right now. And then after we go through this breakdown and analysis, James and I are going to sit down because I have an alternate theory that's outside the ring because a lot of the talent did seem kind of off at times throughout the entire pay-per-view. See, James, I said pay-per-view and not PLE, Premium Live Event, I guess they call it. So we're going to scrub here. This is the beginning of them going back and forth with the superplex, Falcon's Arrow type finish. And here's Seth Rollins going up. Very athletic, superplex, picks him up. Right here, Damien Priest's going to hit the knee on him right there. Nice spot there. And they're going to go back and forth with this. Up again. Rollins with the knee. Camera angle there wasn't as good as the first one with Priest. This was a good camera angle right here. You can see the knee. Here you can kind of see it. But here we go. Falcon's Arrow. Down. And here's the ref's count right here. Now, I'm going to look at him. I think Priest is trying right there to lean over, hooks the leg. Very weird spot. I'm trying to see. He doesn't have him covered. I'm going to look right here with the pen because what's very important right here, I'm trying to see first and foremost, is his arm stuck under Rollins here or the far part here? I don't believe it is. It doesn't look like it is at all. So I'm looking just to see if this is trapped or that. Because in the video, when I watched it, it didn't look like there was any movement from Priest to where he was stuck and couldn't get either shoulder up. It felt like he kind of, I guess, zoned out or something. We're going to talk about that, like I said, when we sit back down. But here's 1, 2, and there it is. I'm looking at his eyes right here, trying to see. All right, this right here, going back and forth, and try to get Chris to highlight Damien Priest's face right there, his expression. He's kind of fluttering and looking off. Usually when you're looking at an account, he's looking this way. So I'm trying to split hairs here and look at this, James, and everybody out there. But what I'm looking at is his eyes are here. Whereas anytime most people get pinned, you're literally looking at the ref's count right there. So he kind of looks with the eyes right here, he might be a little out of it. So my theory was not that he was knocked out, but the way his eyes looked a little glazed over, I don't know if that's a sell, like especially right here. It's like he's not even, when you hear the count, just as a talent, when you hear the count, your eyes for some reason, and it does kind of, kill the illusion a little bit, but you look up and pay attention to the ref's counts because every ref, Nick Patrick, Bronco Lovage back in the day, and then these guys and girls, they have a different cadence of accounts. You have to get to know that, or at least keep your eyes on the referee. And here it is. That was 3 right there. And referee holds up 2. Now, the other theory is the lights come on because Drew's music hits. So maybe he wasn't supposed to kick out because Drew's music would have hit on 1 or 2, and then everybody, so Rollins would have got up off of him and not pinned him. So that's kind of he looks like he might be a little out of it. Oh, you know what? Wait a minute. I'm going to stop. See, this is where we correct ourselves. Now, here's my question as we sit down after this, James. Here's the commentators table. Priest is looking this way. Is the entranceway the opposite from the commentary table? If so, Damien Priest, I would be paying attention to ref in case the music doesn't hit in time, but Priest is looking at the entryway to see if Drew's music's going to hit. That's my theory as I'm looking at this now. And then that face. I know that face. I've had that face before. Oh God. Oh no. And then the music hits because the light comes up, right? So it's a good 2-3 seconds late on Drew's music hitting the cash in the briefcase. Yeah, that's definitely it. That sucks. This is where you should have the music hit early rather than late, because then the ref can count to get up, go through with that false finish or the false count, get up and check, and then Rollins can get up off him too. If you do it at 2, there's a chance there's going to be that 1 second that the music guy does not hit the music, and you have a situation like this. So that's my theory. Now, I have an alternative theory that could have stacked up with this for the entire show, but that's what I think I'm leaning towards. He was looking for Drew and the music to hit and all that stuff, and Rollins even was facing that way to see if he could, get up off of there or do whatever. He had to stay on Priest and cover him because if he just got up out of nowhere, well, it looked the same as what it did here. Basically, it got botched. And we're going to talk about that term during the press conference too. But that's my theory right now.
So there we go. We started out thinking it might have been one thing. We're now thinking it's a production error. Because I was looking at the Falcon Arrow and I was thinking, didn't look like he landed high on his neck or anything like that. It looked fairly right. I mean, if you're on your back, let's presume we're going with the original hypothesis here and say it was a bad botch and he knocked him goofy. Would you be selling, or he didn't in fact, would he be selling with his eyes if he was flat on his back? And you sort of know that the camera's not really looking at your eyes anyway. Would you be, how would you deal with your eyes at that point if you were selling? Would you still be looking at the referee? You wouldn't bother?
No, you always assume the camera's somewhere finding you, whether you're talking, calling spots, not selling, goofing off, ribbing each other in the ring. The cameras are everywhere. They definitely got the best camera angle for that because they would have gotten Seth's reaction when Drew's music hit if it hit on time. And Priest, it's hard. You want your eyes closed like you're knocked out, but you're not really knocked out. You got the wind knocked out of you. That's why sometimes it's almost better when you're looking back at the ref because it looks like you got knocked so silly you rolled your eyes in the back of your head because you're looking up. So kind of like when people get knocked out in boxing, they talk about their eyes rolling in the back of their head or they're looking backwards, counting the lights. But in this case, Priest, he looked like he was out of it, but I think he was trying to sell, but also looking for the cue. And that's what I see there. The only reason I did that was because I saw the commentary table and I go, wait a minute. I assumed they were in a different position, but they're literally both facing the aisleway, waiting for Drew and his music to hit and the cash in. The other theory that I had for the whole show is this is a pay-per-view weekend or a PLA weekend, as they say now. I don't know if they had any appearances. I don't know what type of travel day they had getting through Canadian border, customs. It's always a nightmare for talent to go through there. They've always done it. It's always a hassle going from the US to Canada. Then was your flight delayed? How was your rental car? Were you able to check into your hotel and get a good night's sleep or a rest? Did you have to go right to appearances? Did you feel like your entire rhythm was off from the second you left to go on the road? We've all had those days, and weeks and sometimes months, years. But that's what I think with the whole show, it felt like there was a lot of these missed timings and things happening. Maybe the production people were held up at the border. There could have been all this stuff put in that people don't see and don't know about that really contributes. Now, I give wrestlers so much credit because they deal with it every single time they go on the road. There's always going to be a delay or a canceled flight or your room's not ready or your rental car got rented to somebody else. And then you can't find a gym, you can't find food. It just snowballs. And these guys and these girls can go out there and perform live, no second takes, and do that. But if, occasionally you're going to have where the chemistry's off, your mental makeup is lost because you had a hell of a day or weekend, and you just don't feel like you're in rhythm. You could also be like, I ate crappy food and I'm lethargic, I'm bloated, I don't feel good, or I didn't eat enough, or I didn't hydrate. All these different things factor into any entertainer and or athlete that's going to perform. That's why I give them credit because we pay attention to this one thing right here, which happens about maybe to this level 2, 3% of the time. Those are great. Those are great odds.
Where is the music guy stationed? Because I think in the old days, to queue up some music, didn't you have like someone in gorilla position was on the phone to the truck and they said play whatever? You know, there was like a barriers of communication rather than someone right there at gorilla. Do you know who queues up the music or sets it off or where they're positioned these days?
I think there was a guy I was pretty friendly with that was doing stuff like that, was Tucker, but I'm not sure if he's doing lighting or music. Usually, if you're going up the ramp to Gorilla, if you go to usually to the left as you're going up towards ramp. So if you're coming down the ramp, it's to your right. There's always the boards and everything there. You notice like a lot of the talent, and I was one of them that would hide out behind those boards because it was pretty dark and not many people were up in that corner, and you're able to watch the show like a fan, but also I would watch what they would do, and that would be where they would hit the music, the lights, and they're all pre-programmed too. So you can hit like someone's entrance, and I believe it's timed like pyro and stuff like that, sometimes to the music, but there was a time where that was manual as well. And we saw plenty of mistakes with Kane's pyro and Batista's and stuff like that. But they're in the arena and they do have a monitor, I believe. So they're not completely in the dark, literally or figuratively. And everyone's got headsets. And sometimes during main events, especially, you'll have the agent for the match with a headset and everybody's communicating. The agent usually, I think, would be there and say, "Hey, you gotta hit the music. It's time for them to come out." So I don't know if they got distracted for half a second or they went home a little early and they weren't ready for it.
I mean, maybe it could just be like a software malfunction. You know, you press a button and then it takes a few seconds to get going. And it happens.
Oh,
It
God
does
knows
happen.
we're gonna have a lot of those.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like on the software that I use occasionally, and it'd always be on something really important, it would just, you press record and then the video would freeze for 10 seconds and then it would just start as normal, but there was no way of actually checking it until you'd finish recording and then you watch it back. Poor Damien Priest has had two bad looks here because he did the botch with, you know, he got his leg trapped in the ropes the month before, I think, or the month before that, whichever one it was. Here's a question for you, and I believe this was instituted in WWE while you were there, maybe 2002, 2003, something like that. What should the referee have done? Because at some point in the early 2000s, Vince McMahon told the referees, call it as a shoot. And then that led to an incident on Raw where I think maybe Booker T was involved. He got thrown into the steps and the referee called it as a disqualification. And it's one of those things. What did the referee do the right thing here? Did he do the wrong thing here?
Well, you did the right thing because you always count the 3. Anytime I have anything that's a false finish or anything like that, say on TV or especially the indies where you gotta really kind of get your point across to everybody, make sure there's no words unsaid or stones left unturned before a match because everybody could be thinking something different. I will tell the referee every single time, count to 3. If I don't kick out and he doesn't kick out, it's our fault. That's the way it does. And I know there's the Curtis Axel thing with Cody Rhodes, the famous meme with that, that ref was trying to F on me or that old meme that he told the story at StarCast way back, but the ref counts. Now the disqualifications and the stairs and all that stuff, that might, there was also a 6 to 8 month thing where Vince had such a, like, he wanted people to have tag ropes in the corner, like during tag. That was all we heard on every house show, every talent meeting, grab the tag rope, so he gets these things, but the ref counting the three should be just a universal rule. If the talent can't kick out, it's their fault. If the talent lapses, if the talent's trying to pay attention for the music to hit, I really don't think, honestly, I don't think a kick out would have hurt. Now, it would have been better if the music kicked on while the pin was happening, but kick out and maybe, you know what I would have done? What I would have done if I were Rollins is call the audible and say, I'm going back for the stomp, get his music hit. So if he came back for the stomp, he was setting the stomp up after the kick out. Now he's in position to see Drew. He's about to hit the finish and win the title. I think that move, the curb stomp, would have been better to set up because now Seth has space. Everything's there. Priest is starting to turn over onto all fours and that music hits. And now we have, we have a picture that we need without anybody counting the three.
See, now it's on the talent for not kicking out on this one, but the referee only counts to two. So ultimately, he has to count to two because Damien Priest, and it's for a title. He has to keep the title for the purpose of the story.
But he essentially counted the three.
But then he goes up to the thing, and then
that came down like this, and he didn't even do like this, or his shoulder was up, or he just did two. That was it.
But ultimately, it's not on the referee. The referee had to count to two, or basically call it as a two. But then it's the referee that looks like the idiot all the time there. So I feel bad for the referee in this respect because he's done a bad call, even though for the purpose of the advancing of the storyline, he had to make.
Well, there's two ways to do that. Number one way is just there's enough hours of wrestling, people are going to forget about it. We're probably already too late to the party with what we're talking about, like basically 6 days later when this airs on Friday or whatever clip goes up, could be even more. I look at it this way. The only way, two ways you save it. Number one, you ignore it, just move on. Number two, you need a Danny Davis evil referee type situation because, or Drew, they could refilm something that I'm thinking about it. You do it. The horse has already left the barn. I was going to say if Drew acts like he paid the referee off or did what there's no good way to get around it. But I'll tell you what's the worst way to kind of go about it is when you suspend disbelief completely during a press conference and you talk about a botch in a pro wrestling event. I don't agree with that.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because I've got the quote up right now for it. So, Triple H on the referee call. This is from 411 Mania, who's done what I'm reading off. Referee's decision is final. I'm looking forward to having a conversation with the referee to see what he saw that I didn't see, that you didn't see, that no one saw. Look, human beings in a ring, mistakes happen, things happen. It is what it is.
I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah.
Anytime Hunter's going to give a super political answer, that's not a completely accurate quote because I saw the video of it. He said, it's funny. Anytime Hunter says, it's funny, you're about to get the political answer. You ever notice now you aren't going to be able to ignore it. It's a tell. Right.
Okay, then. So so the political answer, but I haven't teed it up with the political answer quote beforehand. That's not even on here. They didn't even quote the most salient portion of it, I guess. I can read more into it, but is that the big reveal? He didn't actually say, yeah, we messed up, sorry.
Well, he kind of said, I should have took his phone or had him shut his phone off so he didn't see social media and all that stuff. The reason why I have a problem with this, the biggest reason, Damien Priest is supposed to be a heel. He's supposed to be a heel. But what you're doing when you're saying these things is you're trying to garner sympathy for a heel. You're better off not even mentioning it or, like, what are you going to say? The music was hit too late? Yeah, any answer is going to expose the business to a point. And I said it before, and AEW has been so egregious with this all the time, and they started it. That's why I can't believe that WWE picked up on this particular thing from AEW, because I feel like this is the most business damaging, business exposing, and it's already been exposed, I know. But when you sit there and you go right on your nose, what you saw for 3 hours is fake. You wasted your time. Sorry, suckers. You know, you paid money and we're going to tell you how fake it is now. I don't like that.
What about the Wyatt Six here? They were taking a photo with a fan after a show. I know it's sort of similar in that kind of thing. Is that kayfabe breaking enough that it gets to you, or is that something different?
You talking about a heel taking a picture with a fan after the show?
Yeah, the Wyatt Six, the entire group took a photo with a fan, like a Denny's or something.
That's a whole different story, just because if they did that today, because they're starting to unmask them and the vignettes, but if they didn't need to do that like 1 hour after the show or whatever it was. Yeah, I don't agree with that either, because the Wyatt Six is completely different, and really there's less wiggle room to expose the business, even less than the Triple H thing, because they are mythical characters. They are large. It's The Undertaker. The reason why The Undertaker is so over, even now that he's talking like a regular dude, is because how many decades did he protect the character? How many times did Undertaker not show up, even for, I think he showed up for a award show, like a kids award show or something, or Nickelodeon way back. And he was full Undertaker gear, full Undertaker music, Undertaker lighting, all that stuff. The presentation and everything was meant to protect the character. So the Wyatt Six, what mystique do they have when they just already in a tattoo shop or a store or something?
Nothing, they were in a restaurant or something, like a Denny's maybe, I don't know.
Now they're being framed kind of like baby faces. So after the fact, we're talking about it weeks after this. Yeah, now it's kind of like, okay, but that was the debut of them. So getting back to Triple H, in other words, why not just left things unsaid? Or why not? Why have these press conferences? I understand too. I understand John Cena saying, I'm retiring, and after the show, I'm going to take any and all questions at a press conference. That's a special event. That doesn't mean everybody who had a match that night needs to do a press conference. I would have left it for Cena and Cena alone. Nobody else.
Do you know what the press conferences are for? There is no benefit to the wrestling companies. The only benefit is to the social media types who go there and get their own footage and then post it and then make some money off it that way, which I wanted to be one of those, let me tell you, but AEW has effectively banned me from all those press conferences.
Is that my fault for the Moxley?
Oh, no. This was even before that. No, I was trying to get a pass for the Wembley thing, as well as some other stuff as well. And no, I'm sorry, I was trying to get interviews with a couple of AEW people. I wrote to them personally and said, that's absolutely fine, you have to clear it through AEW. Then all of a sudden AEW was like, no, they don't have any room to do this at the moment. And then I tried to get a pass for All in Wembley, and keep in mind that they would give passes to people with like Twitter followers like in the dozens. They would give a press pass to anybody who was pro AEW. And then there's me.
Well, that's the point right there.
Exactly.
That's the point.
We tell the truth as we see it. So unless you're just sucking up to them, they won't have you there. So that's the only reason they exist, is just a giant suck-up fest. WWE, not quite as much. They will let people there who are openly critical of them, or fair with them at least. And then Triple H will just answer sarcastically if he doesn't like the question. Or John Cena will say about the Vince McMahon thing, I've already answered that question elsewhere, look it up. But thank you for the question. That kind of thing. WWE are not quite as bad as
I shouldn't have said any and all questions, because they always open it up for everything.
How do you feel about Vince McMahon shitting on a woman's head? Oh, it's a great question, but I've already talked about it.
I don't think anybody's thought. I think anybody's going into detail. I don't think anybody should. But getting into that, like I've always thought, you're talking about these people that go to the press conferences and the scrums and stuff. I'm still under the mindset too that wrestling should really mirror what the NFL and other places do, where you do have former wrestlers, former talents, and other people formerly in the business mixed with people like you that are neutral parties that are educated and knowledgeable to have talking head shows like this or have other stuff going on where you talk about the real stuff that's going on in the business. And I think that's the one thing that's missing from wrestling. You want to do a scrum or a press conference, knowing that people are going to be more interested in the Game of Thrones type stuff that's going on with your own family or within the company or the power struggle, the interesting thing that makes other TV shows garner millions of viewers every week. But then when you get the questions, you shut them down, essentially saying, we're only trying to promote the pay-per-view. We're only trying to do this. Well, you can't have those guardrails. You can't have it both ways. And AEW can't have, pro AEW and only pro AEW because that'll get boring. What gets clicks?
But they
what
are.
Gets clicks on what we talk about?
Yeah.
They turn into that.
Yeah. I mean, but they turned into that immediately. They were only ever pro AEW. I mean, I'm sure I heard one time, and this might be rumor and that kind of thing, that they actually had like those almost like Reddit Smurfs and stuff like that, where, because I'm sure WWE has the same thing as well, but AEW I always find more egregious where they try and shut down any criticism of them. Whereas I think WWE is so big they don't care. But I think there was like people on Reddit. So if anyone would talk negatively about AEW on Reddit, they'd have like this wave of, I don't know if they were robots or like a few people operating tons of different accounts just to shoot down the person who was negative about AEW, about whatever it was, even if it was a justified or constructive criticism.
It's very odd. I mean, we want to dedicate an entire segment to the ratings because I was looking at the trend of the ratings since Dynamite aired for the first time since the inception of the company. And I sent you ratings from yesterday that basically Dynamite drew like 300 and some thousand, which is only a little bit more.
Collision.
No, it was Dynamite had a low number too. I'll look it up.
Dynamite was around 680 something, I think. So it was like 680 something, 680 something, and then beforehand it was just over 500,000, and there was no competition for it.
I apologize. Rampage drew 309,000, yes, and Collision drew 306,000. But that's the odd part too. So half your audience will not tune into any. You're not giving them anything on Wednesdays to really promote Friday and Saturday. Think about that. You have a 50% drop off when you could be promoting the other shows. Like I said, we can get in that, but that could be an indication of that basically now we've created one big echo chamber. And also we have this tribalism in wrestling every bit as much as we do in the real world today. We also have an Agent Smith effect, which I talked about off air, where, like you said, whether it's real, manufactured, or created by AEW itself, now the Agent Smith effect of do not ruin our matrix, do not ruin our reality, do not tell us we love what we love, and there's your core audience of 300,000 to 600,000 that will never grow because you're shutting out everybody. You're not overcoming objections to what they want. Should I save it for next week?
No, we will save this for next week because I've got
I have an idea of how the AEW can fix everything in one day.
Perfect.
And I'm not exaggerating.
Next week, tease. I promise you, AEW next week, we will do it. That's a great tease for the next episode because I've got tons to add. I think there's a slight misnomer about the ratings drops and the cable drop off as well. I think partially that is a problem for AEW, that WWE has booked the trend. But anyway, we'll talk about that for next week and we'll explore all avenues and how to turn around their business. So before we close down the show, and I didn't say podcast this time, is a little story that we teased last week that we never got around to because of time constraints. So Bill Goldberg, and you worked with him in the early 2000s, and essentially it was, what was Bill Goldberg like to wrestle?
I'm going to start off with what Bill Goldberg was like as a person, not personally, with the limited amount of time I've been around him. Always a really nice, and I use this word for some reason with him, doesn't fit, just a very sweet guy, a very nice guy, very cool. Obviously, just like Austin, and talk about Rocky and other people, a certain intensity where he stands out. Wrestlers just have an aura about them, athletes, entertainers, but especially pro wrestlers have some aura that's just different. It's kind of like Vince McMahon. If this person, like a Goldberg, walked through an airport are people going to look and say, what's that guy do? That's the it factor that Goldberg has on a professional level. On a personal level, you still sense that he's just a different dude, like intense, not different, like weird. We'll get to the weird stuff in a minute, but he was always very disarming towards me because he armed himself extra in the ring. So he's extra disarming outside the ring. He was lulling me into a false sense of security before the match. You were already laughing. You're like, yeah, he's disarming, all right. So, but in the ring, Goldberg's every bit what Brett says he is. Goldberg is reckless. Goldberg is careless. Goldberg is rough to work. Goldberg hurts himself every bit, if not more, than his opponent. I've covered that on what does it feel like to get speared by Goldberg, or what does it feel like to wrestle him. He's there. It's essentially real in so many ways. Now his punches were good. They didn't punch a whole lot, but they weren't there. They were there a little bit, but no more than any other pro wrestler. But everything football related, requiring his body to make contact with yours. Shoulder blocks, power slams, of course, the spear, the jackhammer is about as real as you can feel in a professional wrestling environment. Now, does that mean he's hitting you hard or he's bumping you hard in safe places? Yeah, most of the time. There's times where he speared me and I would tell him beforehand, the first time he speared me, I wasn't even looking. And he speared me and his chin or the top of his head came under my chin. And I hit the back of my head pretty hard. And I probably felt kind of what Brett felt on the figure 4 ring post spot, but Goldberg's body like smeared across me, like an oil slick of stiffness. And it's just a rough night. It's not a night off wrestling Goldberg, but I will say this, it's over pretty quick. But for the bumps you take in a 2-minute match with Goldberg, they can sometimes equal a 30-minute match, a 30-minute Ironman match where you're bumping your ass off. I would say not that, you know what it is? He wasn't the hardest person to work. Heidenreich was the hardest person to be in the ring with, without a shadow of a doubt. Goldberg, if you knew what he was, how he operated, and he deferred to me for the spots in the match. So not saying like he knew what he was doing at that point. He knew what Goldberg was, but he let me formulate, possibly because I'm taking all these moves and I'm taking a finish from him. I can at least formulate what the match is going to look like. Like that whole match we had on Raw, he agreed to it. He said, oh, yeah, I like this here and there. Maybe we can do this. But for the most part, I put that entire 90 seconds or whatever together. I'll jump you a little bit. Don't sell. Kick me. I'll bump. Pick me up if you want to. And he said, oh, I want to do the press slam into the spine buster. I said, that's cool. And I said to him, hey, can we try it here? Because I'm really ass heavy. I'm a lot heavier than I look. So he picked me up. We got the timing down. And he goes, when I do this, I'm going to spin you. Just make sure your arms are over me, for the spine buster. And then I said, okay, well, when I do that, dude, it's such a devastating move. Give me time to sell. Go to the corner. I'm going to get up on my back to you. When I turn around about, say, 5/8, 6/8 around, start running. And I'll run towards you and we'll meet. And then take your time. It's all you. And just pick me up whenever for the jackhammer. And I even said to him, I go, I'm pretty light with that. So when I pick you up, if you feel like you just want to put one arm out, I'll keep myself posted. And then we're done. So he was easy to work from a personality standpoint, but physically one of the roughest guys to be in the ring with.
In 2000, I'm presuming 2003, I believe this would be.
2003, 2004. I had just started growing my hair back. I lost all the RTC fat. And I think this was like right after Victoria or May. Oh no, it was during Victoria, because on the Stevie Night Heat episode after that, I talked about how it was so great that I wrestled Goldberg and the ratings are going to go through the roof, and I gave him a rub. And but basically I sacrificed for my roster That was the beautiful part. I could do a job on Raw and then cut a promo on Heat. As most heels and baby faces, if you lose a match or you're beat down or whatever, the promo or the segment immediately after that is the most important segment to get yourself back on track. Well, his style felt inexperienced in the ring, but Goldberg would do what Goldberg would do, and it would all be very much there, very heavy. Like I said, hard in safe places, sometimes just hard in general. But the reason why I think Bill, what he might have learned more than anything was, okay, this guy's giving me his body. This guy is more experienced, but this guy's giving me his body. He's putting me over in record time. I'm essentially squashing him. Maybe I'll let him develop or formulate how to do that job. If I'm wrestling somebody and they're putting me over, I would say, and Bill, I'm paraphrasing, but I think I was like, hey, Bill, what do you want to do tonight? He goes, hey, Stevie, whatever you want to do, man. You're putting me over. You know, you know what to do. So he deferred to me because I had a lot of experience making talents look as good as I can make them look. That's really what I don't think it's greener experience. I think it's just courtesy. It's a common courtesy in wrestling. It's kind of like agents. Agents would go up to talents that are putting people over and say, hey, we need 8 minutes. And hey, they would say, hey, we need 8 minutes, 50-50, or, we need more shine in the heat or whatever. And hey, do you mind taking his finish and putting him over? We really appreciate it. Yeah, of course. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. That goes a long way. So plus it's an easy night for him because all he has to do is just basically do his 3 moves and it's formulated the way I am. And I just thought, I told him, I go, everybody just waits for you to get in the ring. I go, you can no sell whatever I do, but why would I wait for you? Why would I come get you, which you're going to no sell and just beat me up anyway? It at least gets me to a point, well, he tried, but he's not stupid. He's just trying, but it's no good. That's what I would have chalked it up to. At 2003, 2004, he had not evolved move-wise. He had not evolved, how should I say, somewhat psychology-wise, but he knew what Goldberg was, and he knew how to get over, and he knew how to draw money with that. So why do more? That's like a double-edged sword. Why would he learn how to do arm drags if that's not Goldberg? Doesn't make sense.
I remember in the WCW days, he would introduce a new move every single week, which I really loved in the early days. And then he just sort of stripped it out, and then he was always doing the basics. So that's why, I loved him in WCW. It's one of my favorites.
I think the Office told him. The Office did a great favor to him because what if he just kept popping out moves? And remember Big Show when he was the Giant, he could do moonsaults. He could do all these things. He was so athletic. Paul was so athletic back then, and he still was in WWE for a time, that, oh, he can jump and he do this? Let's see if Luger can put him up in a torture rack. Let's see if Goldberg can spear him and jackhammer. He became too good for his own good and started putting people over. Because, man, you press slam a 500-pound giant, that's impressive. But it ended up hurting him.
Steven Richards, versus Goldberg was July 28th, 2003. I just had to look that up there. We'll talk about Goldberg a bit more.
Coming up on the anniversary, huh?
Hey, God, yeah. What's the date today? Oh, yeah. 18 days away as we record this. So,
maybe we can celebrate the anniversary by him beating me up again.
Why not?
Like a yearly thing.
Hey, well, the thing is, I think his booking fee is going to be quite high. So maybe in a couple of years' time when we save up some money. Did we talk about
my booking fee to go up based on this? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, well, with the finances and stuff, we'll leave it for the day. When did Goldberg start getting intense? So he gets, to the arena at whatever time he gets to the arena in, I guess. When did he start getting a bit, you know what I mean? Just jaw clenching, rocking back and forth, and then start getting into the zone?
I wish I paid more attention to people, but I think by recollection, which the timing could be, I know when Goldberg would, go to catering, do whatever, and then the 4:00 unbooked catering most times, but Goldberg was booked. He'd have his coffee and he'd have the stirrer. And I just know if he started stirring it more and more and more, I'm like, it's getting closer. It's getting closer. And then, of course, the story that you want to hear again and everybody would want to hear. I believe, once again, this was either Massachusetts, New Hampshire, or Maine, one of those Northeast states. We were doing a house show. and it was with Dreamer. That was by the monitor, in the arena. And at a house show, they would bring monitors sometimes or do whatever so the boys could watch it. And there was a soda machine, the infamous soda machine that never hurt anybody except for Goldberg, is my assumption. Because on the way to the curtain, there would always be a soda machine or a vending machine or a fireproof door. And Goldberg would immediately start to have an issue with this soda machine. And this soda machine must have insulted him and disrespected him to a point where Goldberg will start throwing forearm shivers, headbutts, and like a can opener knees to the soda machine. But he would headbutt it more than anything. And famously, when he went to wrestle Undertaker in Saudi Arabia, the rumor, urban legend is that he concussed himself headbutting a door. So that was his ritual before, and I'm sure he carried over from football where you had helmet to helmet, stuff like that. But I remember him doing it every other time. People would just watch and then he would walk off and do whatever. This time he headbutted, he punched, did whatever, headbutted again. Wow, I'll run away. And Dreamer went up and go, "No, you be good, soda machine." He started chastising the soda machine for misbehaving. So that was my favorite story.
Mm.
I don't, what's wrong with just drinking an energy drink or just meditating before your match?
Maybe he's pissed off they didn't have any Diet Fanta or something like that. Who knows?
It was usually me out there in the ring. Like Tommy's like, and he saw Tommy making fun of him. I go, "Dude, I got to probably wrestle this dude on Monday." He goes, "I know." I go,
What was his wind down ritual, if he had one?
I was on my way to the hospital, so I had no clue.
No, it's fine then.
I was having my ribs taped up.
One more thing about Goldberg. How many people did he really injure in WCW or WWE? Because obviously he'd hurt you, he'd rough you up. He was very stiff, as you say, not as bad as Heidenreich. That's a video for another day. But apart from Brett, which we talked about last week, and maybe apart from Vince Russo, which I don't know if Vince Russo thinks Goldberg did it on purpose or not. I was getting the impression that maybe he thought he did. Who's Goldberg actually hurt?
I can't say injured outside of the concussions with Russo and then the obvious, Bret Hart thing that was mixed in with the other matches and all that stuff. The Russo thing, I don't believe Bill would ever intentionally hurt anybody. Knowing what I know from him personally, now the business and being in the ring, getting yourself over, being excited, the adrenaline rush, and then trying to get your stuff in, all that mixed into one could be a recipe for disaster where unintentional could be subconsciously intentional. Because I got to do this to get over. The Russo thing, I think, see, this is where I wish more people, they kind of make fun of me, and it's fine for being so detail oriented, so obsessive with distance, where we're at, function, form. But if it were me, I would look at the distance of the cage to the railing and say, okay, if I fall back, where's the cage going to end up and where's my head and body going to end up? In other words, I don't know how you do it because the ring is a set amount as far as 16 by 16. The Hell in a Cell is a certain width and, around the ring.
Let me just pick you up on that. Sorry. WCW's got a 16 by 16 ring. I'd always heard, and you mentioned this last week as well, and I didn't mention it. I'd always heard it was 18 by 18. Is WCW's definitely 16 by 16?
They might have switched it up. I just remember it being incredibly small, even coming from ECW to WCW. I heard it was 16 by 16. Just my eye, measuring with my eye and my memory from going from that ring and then having to retrain myself completely on a WWE ring, or at the time, WWF. WWF is a true 20-foot ring, but also the ropes are real ropes. So you have to adjust from cable ropes, which are very taut and tight, and then go to ropes. It's a big difference. And then you got to add another, even if it was 18 feet, which let's just get the fact check up, a factoid, you're still talking about 2 extra feet both ways. That's a lot. So 4 extra feet, which when I was looking at the WCW ring, say it when we did Disney MGM. I did those tapings when I was at WCW. The ring looked extremely small in a small building, whereas WWE's ring looks big even in a big arena. So I don't know. I mean, I've heard 16 by 16. I never got out a measuring tape on anything, but I do recall that like going back to those rings, to smaller rings post WWE on the indies, it feels claustrophobic. It feels like you're going to bump into the ropes like every single time, which adjusts the way you move because say for a shoulder block in WWE, you should run into the guy anyway to have room to bump behind you. But you really have to be aware of it in a ring smaller than the WWE ring, because if you're standing back in the middle of the ring waiting to be shoulder blocked and they run you over, you're going to be dangerously close to the ropes when you take that back bump.
I think that's pretty much it, really. I think that's going to be a future segment, WWF, WWE, WCW, ECW, Ring of Honor, and whatever else rings, and comparing them all and which ones you liked and da-da-da. The secrets of the ring, we will call it, for a future episode. But for now, everybody, thank you so much for watching the Stevie Richards Show. Not only are we on YouTube with a brand new episode every single Friday, we are also on every single podcast platform, easy for me to say, as well, iTunes, and see, I want to say Google Podcast, but that just ended a few months ago. So Stitcher and iHeartRadio and all that kind of thing were on there as well. So I know this is mostly a visual medium, but if you can't watch us, then you might as well listen to us and whatever you're doing at work or traveling or wherever you want us to be with you. But thank you so much for all the support you're showing us. And we'll do the plugs one more time as well. I've got 2 books, Owen Hart, The Rock. Descriptions are in the... the links are in the description as well. But I'll throw it over to you, Stevie, for the outro and anything else you want to say.
Yeah, I just want to echo thank you. I'm grateful as well as James for all the immense support in this short time and the growth of the Stevie Richards Show. We're in episode 3. We're just finishing up, but we're just getting started trying to improve the production, have the segments, have more of a format, and bring more value to each and every one of you out there. I have another brand, Stevie Richards Fitness. If you could check that out, subscribe, click the bell to get notified. And also, I talked about in the beginning, I may do a behind the scenes channel to give everybody an idea of what goes on here, how we work together and everything, and also the technology and everything that we have here. We want to educate people, help them, but also empower you if you want to do something similar. There's enough space here for everybody, and competition's good.
Those opinions of Stevie Richards only. I said those are the opinions of Stevie Richards, may not reflect everybody on this show. No,
I'm used to giving my spot up. It's okay.
No, I'm aggressively competitive with this kind of thing. All right, then. On that note, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you again next Friday.